This is September 6th, 2022. We're in Seattle, Washington. I'm Judith Y., and I'm the Archives Chair for District 40. My home group is Saturday Promises, and I'm here today with Kevin. So Kevin, take it away.
Hey, I'm Kevin. I'm an alcoholic, and my sobriety date is August 18th, 1988. And my home group currently is PTP, which is Practically Principles, which is a group that meets 7 days a week, 7 a.m. morning meeting. I've probably been a home group member there for 20 years, and I have had one recovery. And I'm really grateful for that I haven't had to go back out and try it again. When I got sober in 1988, I had hit a bottom that I never thought I would be that low. And I was grateful for the fact that the recovery center that I went to was Alcoholics Anonymous. So, my history is I was born in Western New York in 1957. This year I'm going to be 65 years old, and I've spent over half my life in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm very grateful for that. And my drinking career was based with a family of alcoholics. My grandparents and aunts and uncles owned bars and taverns in Buffalo, New York, and my first drink was at Casey's Grill in Buffalo, New York, which is my grandparents' tavern. I mean, it was the first drink that I remember because we always were able to drink with people, and our family was if you could, hold your liquor, good for you, and if you couldn't hold your liquor, that was like a bad thing. So, basically my grandparents babysat us behind the bar, and that was something that my parents were had other jobs, and that was the place that we were babysat. And I remember sitting behind that bar and watching television, and the bar's name was Casey's Grill. That was my grandfather's name, and alcohol was just like a part of everyday life. It was like alcohol was used in our family for good times and bad times. It was used for weddings and funerals, and the more you drank, the better off it was. So God forbid you had a feeling, and that you would have to use that feeling or have to deal with that feeling. So have a drink and make it go away. I heard in meetings that say, "Oh, I remember my first drink." I have no idea when my first drink was, because it was like my parents would always allow us to have a drink of their beer, or their Manhattan, or let me taste that, or we would they put the drink down and you just grab it, and it's just, I don't remember actually going and having that first drink for that drink's sake. That was just what you did. It was drinking. It was just normal. So growing up in that kind of atmosphere, it was Bob Perk is a guy that sat at my grandparents' bar. He was a retired postal worker, and he sat at that bar every day, drinking a shot and a beer from the time the bar opened to the time the bar closed. And he was that first alcoholic that I ever that Alcoholics Anonymous, I realized he was an alcoholic. He died of cirrhosis of the liver, and and it was that sad and miserable life that we as alcoholics are faced with. And so I, that was like the first real alcoholic I ever knew. And at that time, it was like, oh, I never want to be like that. My parents also drank a lot. And I said, I never want to be like them. I never want to drink the way that they drank, because it was like obsessive amounts of alcohol. Our family home had a bar in it that had 6 bar stools, and a tap behind the bar, and our house was the party house. It was like my parents would like, "You want to drink? drink at home. If we don't want you drinking outside. So if you want to drink at home. And that was including all of my friends. So my parents would always serve alcohol to underage people. That was just normal. And that was back in the 60s and 70s. And that was like nobody even thought about it. And nobody even questioned it. So drinking was part of everyday life. So I'm also a gay man. And back in the 60s and 70s, being a gay man was like, that was not something that was acceptable. At least not my family, it wasn't acceptable. The word faggot was used a lot. And I drank over being a faggot. And I didn't want anybody to know I was a gay man. So, I played the game, I did all the things I was supposed to do. I played football. And it wasn't until I was my senior year of high school, I said, screw that. I want to do something else. And I quit all the sports and I joined the choir and I joined the theatrical groups. And, I had a little bit of fun my last year. But it was also about, I also saw those people in the theater and in the chorus. They were drinking and partying and smoking pot, and that's where I wanted to be. I once out of high school, I went to college, and that was like during my 2 years that I went to college. Drinking and using was not a big thing. It was like I was so into learning my career, which was an interior design career, that I didn't drink and use a lot during that time. And I was like, I look back, I was like, it's not that I didn't drink at all or use it all, but it was like I had to be focused on what I was doing. So alcohol and drugs would like not allow me to focus on what I was doing. So I just put it away. Then I graduated from college from there, and I got my first job, and I worked at a place where you could sit at your desk and smoke a cigarette, and you could, on our lunch hour, we'd go out to restaurants and drink wine and drink beer and, come back to work really drunk, and nobody thought anything about it. It was just like a normal thing. So that kind of like elevated my drinking career. We started going out to bars a lot, and this was in Buffalo, New York, and bars closed at 4:00 in the morning. So as a guy in his 20s, you could go out and drink till 4:00 in the morning, go home, get a couple hours of sleep, and go back to work. And that wasn't every night in the beginning, but there were a lot of nights that I'd get 2 or 3 hours of sleep and go back to work, and I had to have been still drunk going back to work. But again, nobody cared. Nobody cared. That the work career and drinking, it was fun. And I talk about that in part of my story is like alcohol was fun. I had fun with going out and partying with friends. I loved going to bars. I loved drinking. My vodka and tonic was like a really important part of my life. I tried other drinks, but vodka and tonic was the one that was my go-to drink. Going to in the beginning, in my early drinking career, I was going to straight bars, and I was going out dancing with my a couple of friends, and we played this I played the straight routine, and then I met my friend Bill, and he was another gay man, and he wanted to go to he said, we should go downtown and go to the gay bar. And that was me and Alice's downtown on Main Street in Buffalo, New York. And we went there, and it was like I walked into that bar and the music was playing, and the drinks were flowing, and I had thought, men were dancing with men, and I thought I'd found paradise. and I spent a lot of time drinking in gay bars in Buffalo, New York. And that was, that was for a couple of years. Then I decided that, Buffalo was too small of a town, and, I needed to get out of there. I moved to Atlanta, Georgia. I spent one long year in Atlanta, Georgia, just trying to drink enough, just to be able to feel comfortable. I didn't have a great job. I had an apartment that I really didn't. I liked the apartment, but I couldn't afford to live there, and I worked on getting another job, and I, got a great job in Pennsylvania designing furniture stores. That worked out well, but that lasted another year, and that year was like a year in the road, drinking, and had an expense account, and it was like you could drink, and you had to be careful that it didn't get too high, but alcohol could be replaced by, I had a food budget, and that could be spent on an alcohol budget. Not most of the time, it was an alcohol budget. At that time, I was like dealing with a partner that was, he was living in Buffalo, I was living in Pennsylvania. He wanted to move to LA. I thought, I said, Steve, if you want to get a job, if you want to go to LA, you go to LA, find a job. Once you get a job, I'll come out. I know I can get a job in LA. And he did that. I moved out to LA, and damn, that was one of the things that like set off my drinking career. And it was like it was glamorous. It was fun. It's like we're in Hollywood, and I had a group of friends that we'd go out partying, and it worked. Alcohol worked, dancing worked, going out to clubs worked, and I had a ball. I had a great time, and then one of my friends introduced me to crystal meth, and because that was going to make the party better. And the first time I did crystal meth, it was the best high, best feeling, best everything that I've ever felt in my entire life. And then I spent the next 2 years trying to catch that same high, and never was again able to accomplish that same high. The one thing crystal meth did was allow me to drink so much more alcohol. And if it wasn't for crystal meth, I probably would have had another 10 or 12 years of drinking left in me. But crystal meth brought me down to my knees with alcohol within 2 years. And within 2 years, I'm laying on my bed in the middle of the night on August 14th, 1988, wondering if the next line of crystal meth was going to make my heart explode, or if I did that next line of crystal meth, what was going to be the next step? Was there going to be enough alcohol in the house? Was there going to be enough, pot to bring me down from the crystal meth? And I just didn't want to feel that way anymore. And it was that, at that time in the early 80s and late 80s, there was a lot of the commercials running for, recovery centers, and a lot of the chic shadle, with a few weekends and a few follow-ups, you can get sober, you don't ever have to drink again. And that, thank God, that wasn't the recovery center I called. I picked up the phone and called recovery center. It happened to be in Riverside, California. And they talked to me that night, and they said, you don't have to, we can help you. We need to check your insurance at that time. And at that time, I'm really grateful for the fact that I had a really great job, and I had a really great insurance policy, and they covered the insurance covered it. And the next morning on August 18th, 1988, I call them angels, and I don't even remember what their names are anymore, but I can remember what they looked like. A man and a woman came to my apartment. They picked me up, and they said, we're going to take you. You're going to be okay. Know that you're going to be okay. And for some reason, this like strung out, drunk, high, drug addict, alcoholic went in their car and went with them and I started the process. You know, it was a 2.5 hour drive from West Hollywood to Riverside, California. And, you know, for 2.5 hours, those people talked to me and they said it was going to be okay. And I was going to be okay. And I got to that hospital and they, you know, I went there thinking my problem was addiction to crystal meth and not even knowing what addiction was at that time. But I think I had a problem with crystal meth. And when I got to the hospital, we did an intake, and the doctors there were far more concerned about the half a gallon of vodka I was drinking a day. And I drank a lot of vodka, and I did crystal meth, and I smoked a lot of pot, but they were concerned about the vodka. And it was the first time that I realized that I might be an alcoholic. I'm grateful I went to a hospital because they were able to keep me alive for those first 3 days. Because if I would have tried to detox on myself and just tried to stop everything, I wouldn't have survived it. And they were concerned that, you know, even being in the hospital, was I going to be able to survive the first couple of days of recovery? And I was in the hospital and they took care of me and they fed me and they woke me up and they kept me alive. And on day 3, they handed me a big book and said, okay, it's down the hall, there's a meeting, you go to that meeting. And it wasn't my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was the first meeting. It was a group session of about 20 people that were talking about recovery and talking about the big book, talking about the 12 and 12, and talking about what it was like to be sober. This is good for me to do because it's like it's been a long time since I've told my whole story. So, you know, in that center, it was like, again, it was like I had my secret, you know, because I went there and it was like very straight. You know, Riverside, California was very straight, very Republican, and I went there, and after about 10 days, the counselor said, "So what's the secret?" And he said, you're keeping a big secret. What's the big secret? And my big secret was I'm a gay man, because, you know, in 1988, it was like, you know, it was better to be gay, but it still wasn't, you know, socially accepted like it is today. And I was able to tell him that I'm a gay man. And it was like, and it was that fact that in Alcoholics Anonymous, there are no big deals. And that was just part of my story. And it's like, the fact is, like, you know, I'm okay. And it made me be okay. And I got to tell those 20 people in our group that I was a gay man. And it was that first time, like, that big weight came off my shoulder, that I was able to tell complete strangers that I was gay. And that started the process of recovery. And that program was a 21-day program. And, you know, and I talked about the fact that, you know, 21 days, you need to be able to break a habit, and, you know, you need to, like, just stay here. And I'm grateful that I stayed there for the 21 days. And the fact that, you know, when the time was coming for me to leave, it was really scary, because I knew at home there was still drugs and alcohol, probably in my house. And there were, and then I had to go home and clean that out. And in the hours that I was leaving, a nurse came up to me, somebody that I'd never seen in the hospital, never seen in the recovery part of the hospital. And she came up to me, so she says, "Okay, Kim, what are you going to do now? You're leaving. What are you going to do now?" I said, "I don't know." I said, "I'm really scared." She gave me one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever got. She goes, "You need to know where your next meeting is. Before you leave here today, know where your next meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous is, and go there." And I was able to, before I left that hospital, I knew where my next meeting was. And that was my first meeting outside of the hospital was at, it was called the Happy Hour meeting at Fountain and Fairfax in West Hollywood. And it met at 5 o'clock. And I'm very grateful that it was a gay meeting. And I left that recovery center. I didn't go home. I went to that meeting. And when I went to that meeting, of course, like I'm still always early. I was a half hour early, and of course nobody was there. And I'm thinking, oh, what I've gotten myself into. And a guy started coming into the meeting. Sorry, I get emotional about this because it was that first time that a group of gay men came and said, "Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous." And I don't know if he's still around or not, but Matt M came up and said, "Hey, honey, how are you?" And he was like about a 400-pound leather queen. And I thought, oh my God, is this what my life is going to be about? And he made me laugh. And he said, you're going to be okay. Just come in. He said, you're new. Have a seat. We'll take care of you. Don't worry about anything. And other men came in, and there were probably 40 to 50 men that came into that meeting. And what I got from that first meeting outside of the recovery center was gay men having a ball and laughing, carrying on, and teasing each other and having fun. And it's like, oh my God, you can do that sober. And I was really grateful for the fact that I was able to find that group and start connecting with other gay men. And I still was not comfortable about it being gay, but it was like a place to go. And I started attending a lot of gay meetings, and I was grateful for the fact that in West Hollywood and the Hollywood area, there were a lot of gay meetings on a regular basis. You could go pretty much hundreds of meetings a week that were gay meetings, and that was like so important for me to be comfortable because I, as a gay man, was homophobic. I was afraid of other gay men. I was like, I just didn't want to be around them because I was never around having fun with gay men. It was always about, for me, it was always about gay men were about having sex, and that's all they were good for. And now all of a sudden it was like, there's a different way here. So I got to go to a lot of gay AA meetings. And in the beginning, I was so damn crazy. I had the voice in my head talking to me all the time. And I went to a morning meeting, I went to a noon meeting, I went to a mid-afternoon meeting, and I went to an evening meeting. And I went to average between 3 and 4 meetings a day. And that was for my first year of sobriety, because that's what I could do. It was that 1 hour for the meeting that my head would shut down, and I could like listen to what was going on, and I could laugh. And it wasn't about me and my alcoholism. It was about just being in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and hearing what other people had to say and how they were staying sober. And I got my first sponsor in a gay AA meeting, and I'm really grateful for David, that first sponsor. He was an executive with Sony Pictures, and I had his personal phone number, and I could call him, and he would answer my phone call in the middle of the day. And if it was important enough, he would talk to me. And if I was just in a crazy spot, he would tell me to call him later. And it was always, he said, are you going to drink over it? I said, no. He said, well, let me talk to you a little bit later. But if I thought I was going to drink about it, he would talk to me. I'm so grateful that the obsession for alcohol was lifted. He taught me about praying for the fact that, go home tonight and pray about the fact that you need the obsession to drink to be lifted. And that worked. I don't know how it worked, but it worked. I still have this thing about not believing, I grew up in a Catholic church and was a good altar boy and did all the things and never believed in the BS of the Catholic Church. But there was something about praying to something that I didn't need to know what it was. It was okay. He said, your higher power can be whatever you want it to be. He said, you can, just pray that your obsession to drink is lifted. And it was. In that first year of sobriety, I also tested positive for HIV. And it was a case of one of my friends in AA he needed to be tested. He was really concerned about it. And I thought, Rich, I'll go with you. I'll get tested too. Don't worry about it. I'll go, we'll go together. You're really upset with this. I'll go with you. And I'll get tested. And we can do this together. And that was something that I never, I completely assumed that I wasn't positive. And of course, the test results came back, and he tested negative, I tested positive, and it was one of those things that that sponsor told me. He said, "It's just another life event." He said, "You don't have to drink over it. You don't have to use over it." He says, "You have one day. Today is one day at a time. This program is about one day at a time." He said, "You're doing that with alcoholism. You're going to do that with HIV." And, now it's 35 years later, 34 years later, and I was able to survive the early drug treatments. I was able to do things that other guys were, not doing, and I'm alive today. And I really believe that I'm alive today because of some of the guys in Alcoholics Anonymous that were trying Chinese medicine. They were doing other things, and I could hear what they were doing and ask them questions about it that I would have never done if I was drinking and using. So for me, it's like that's the other thing I'm really grateful for. I'm grateful for the fact that my first sponsor insisted on service. He said, you're not going to do this unless you have a service position. You got to do something. So one of my first service positions was, he said, "You're going to be the greeter." I said, "Greeter? What's a greeter?" And he says, "On Sunday morning, the log cabin meeting is the largest gay AA meeting in Los Angeles. You're going to be the greeter there. And you're going to go in there and say, hi, I'm Kevin. I'm an alcoholic," to every single person that walks in the door. And for a terrified, homophobic gay man, that was like one of the hardest things for me to be able to do that. And I'm so grateful for the fact that he said, "It's just about service. He said, it's just about being there for other alcoholics." And it took me out of myself, and I was able to do that. And, years later, people came up to me and said, "I was so grateful that you were the greeter at the door," because he said, "You were the only person that ever said anything to me at that meeting." And I never realized what effect just saying hello to somebody had on other people. My other service commitment was a coffee commitment at an early morning meeting. It was a meeting that it met in Fairfax at a different part of the church, and that was a 7 a.m. morning meeting, and I took a coffee commitment there. And for that meeting, we had 100-cup urns, and to make that coffee, you had to be there an hour before the meeting, so that meant you had to be there at 6. For me, it was like I had to go to the grocery store before the meeting and get coffee. And in Los Angeles, alcohol started being sold at 6 a.m. So it was me buying coffee for the Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and the alcoholics there buying their alcohol to get their day started. And I'll always remember that, because I was doing something different. I wasn't buying alcohol, and I didn't need to buy alcohol. And I got to go to that meeting and be of service to other people. And I got to listen to people complain about how bad the coffee was. And my sponsor told me, it was like, that's just part of being a coffee person. And, it's Alcoholics Anonymous. Nobody's ever going to be happy. They're always going to complain about something, and it's probably going to be your coffee. And he said, be grateful that they're complaining to you and they're leaving other people alone. So I made a lot of coffee. So it was, it was the height of the AIDS crisis. And so Alcoholics Anonymous was a really amazing place to be at that time. because I would have people, I would say these are like really amazing, beautiful men completely deteriorate and die, um, and stay sober. And if they could do it, so could I. You know, if they could go through Kaposi's, and they could go through pneumocystic pneumonia, and they could go through parents taking them back to Utah because that's where they thought they belonged, and take them away from their gay friends, and they could stay sober, so could I. And it was such an inspiration. Guys would be carried into Alcoholics Anonymous meetings because they were incapable of walking in themselves, but the guys of Alcoholics Anonymous were there for them and supported them and said it was going to be okay and you're in the right place. And I heard those messages, and it was the biggest inspiration of my entire life. And I get still emotional about it. And I can still see the faces of those guys, both the guys that were dying and the guys that were helping. And they were there, and they were laughing, and they were having fun. And that wasn't happening in any, I don't think, in any other community in the gay community except for Alcoholics Anonymous, because most of the gay men were like so scared and so paranoid. And in AA, we were like celebrating life, and the fact is you're alive today, and what did you do today? And it was about one day at a time you have today, and that was really important to me. So after living with the AIDS crisis for about five or 6 years, I decided, all my friends had died, and my whole peer group, my sponsors, everybody that I knew, they had died of AIDS, and I got really sad, and I decided I needed to make a change. So I was working for a company that said, there's a great opportunity for you up in Seattle. Why don't you come up to Seattle and work up here? And I moved to Seattle, and it was 1994. I moved to Seattle, and it was, I moved up to Capitol Hill, and some of the first meetings I went to was the Capitol Hill Alano Club on Boylston, and it was different. I came here and they were like, what the hell's with this hour-and-a-half long meetings? And it's like every meeting I went to was an hour and a half long, and LA meetings were an hour, and some of them were 45 minutes. And it was like, what's this hour and a half thing? But the fact was, I have to go there and hear the message of Alcoholics Anonymous, and and understand that I'm a sober man being a service to other sober men. So just shut up about the length of the meetings and just go. And I started to develop a community here. And what was interesting is that they talk about the Seattle freeze, and that happens in the gay community also. It's like people that have lived here for years, didn't really want to associate with people that had just moved in here. So it was tough making friends. But I made a group of friends that were all imports from other parts of the country. And they were all in Alcoholics Anonymous, and we had fun. And we went places, and we did things, and we would, there's still on my refrigerator is a refrigerator magnet with the Serenity Prayer on it from the Emerald City Roundup from 1995. And that was something that, was very important to me, that I went there and got to participate in that. And I wish a conference like that was still continued, but Seattle the gay community just couldn't seem to get it together to have it happen. But I was able to go to other conferences and do other things, to go other places, go to LA and to, Vancouver had a great conference over Easter, and, I was able to do those kind of things. So now I'm in Seattle, and I was able to find a great sponsor here. Uh, for the first time, I started working with a woman sponsor. It was CJ was just what I needed when she popped into my life, and we went to meetings, and she was another one. It's like this is not about any. She wouldn't put up with any of my bullshit, and it was like you're going to do the steps. We did, we went through the steps again with her, and we worked those steps, and I was able to tell her all of my secrets, and I'm grateful for those. There's been force people in my life that have known everything about me. Um, that they were, that in a fifth step, they were able to hear all of my secrets. And that was the one thing that my first sponsor, David, said when I did my first fifth step. He said, well, okay, he said, that was really good. So he says, okay, what's the one secret you're not telling me? What's that big dark secret that you're not telling me? And I was able to tell them, and it was about incest in my family. And I didn't want anybody to ever know that, but I was able to talk about that. And it wasn't that I was even the perpetrator of it. I was the recipient of it. And there was such shame that I was able to talk about it. And what I love about, the 1,000-pound weight that I've been carrying around for years was lifted and gone. My baggage became part of my past, and it's not that all of that has disappeared completely, but it's become part of my past. And that's every time I've done a fifth step, I no longer get to carry that. It no longer becomes a burden. It no longer becomes that obsession. I get to let it go, and I get to work on other things. I haven't talked this much in a long time. So, I got to work with CJ, and she, more than anything, and to this day, I still see her at meetings, and we haven't worked together in years, but I get to see her, and we still have that instant connection. She's still, I love her as much as I could love any person because of the work that she was able to do and the support that she was able to give me. I've worked with many men over the years. I think if you're going to stay sober, you have to give this away. And that, again, I go back to David, and that was like one of the things that he instilled in me was, if you're going to be an Alcoholics Anonymous, you got to be able to give it away. He said, what are you willing to do to stay sober? And I would always say anything. And he said, anything, and talk to another alcoholic. So my role in the first year of sobriety was every meeting I went to, you had to give your number out to 3 different people. And at that time, there were a lot of people coming in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous. So there was always a new face to give your number to. And I probably gave my number out to 1,000 people, and I don't think I got any phone calls back, but it was just that action of taking that action of here. It's not like today where we have cell phones, you can type in a number. You have to physically write it down on a piece of paper and give it to the person. And it was taking that action that for me was very important. I also I have to carry quarters around with me, because if I needed to call my sponsor, I need to be able to have money for a phone booth. If you're new in AA, there used to be these things you put quarters in and you could call people. We didn't have cell phones, so it was, you had to work. I think you had to work a little harder just to make sure that you knew where a phone was and you knew you could call somebody. I knew, for me, it's like I had to have people's numbers written down someplace so I could be able to pick up the phone and call them. Because my memory will never keep numbers in my head for phone numbers. So I had to physically write it down and have it with me and have them in my car. And, in my big book, the numbers were written in, my meeting directory, there were phone numbers written. So those are things that I learned in early recovery that I still carry on today. Is like, write down your number, put it in a book, have it someplace so that even in an emergency you can call somebody. So CJ left. Well, we just kind of parted ways. Her life got complicated, my life got complicated, and my last sponsor was Dave, another Dave, and he was a straight man from Western New York, and he was the only man in my sobriety that had this laser focus on like my bullshit. He just could focus in on my bullshit. And it's like, we'd be talking and we became friends more than just sponsor. We became friends. And he says, "You're full of shit, Kevin. Go do something about that. Get off your goddamn ass and do something about it." And I love him for that. I love him for the fact that he was old time AA, and he was like, buy the book, and this is the way we did it on the East Coast, and this is the way I did it, and you've asked me to sponsor you, so I must have something you want, so you better be listening to what I'm saying. And I did. And I really respected his sobriety, and he died a few years ago. And the fact is, he had moved back to the East Coast, and we were being sponsored by phone, and he was diagnosed with a fatal heart condition. And he called me and said, "Kevin, I have like a couple weeks to live." So he said, "I need you to do something for me." And he's like so cheerful, and he's so upfront about it. He says, "I'm going to die." And he says, "I want my ashes spread in Seattle. So can you do that for me?" It's like, "Of course, Dave, I can do that for you." And I'm like, I'm ready to completely fall apart. And he's like, his big concern is that his ashes are spread in Seattle. And that was the gift of the program, to spread his ashes in Seattle. And it was like, again, it was being of service, doing something for another alcoholic, and just showing up where you didn't think you could possibly show up, and doing something you didn't possibly think you could do. And his partner at the time flew out here and joined me with that. And her and I just went to Lake Washington and spilled his ashes. And that was what he wanted and how he wanted it done. And that was a great thing. So, Alcoholics Anonymous in Seattle today. For me, it's like, I know AA is always going to be changing, and that AA is on it has changed since the 30s. There's always been some kind of change, something's different. I'm really grateful for the fact that, there's a group conscience that, we can, things can change, but, people can't control Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm really grateful for the traditions, because it keeps me in line, and it keeps other people in line about how far AA can go, or what people can change in AA. And that, what I've found over the years is that when it's a really controversial subject, it's usually tabled for a very long time, and people get to think about it, people get to work on it. So I've done everything from, our PTP used to answer telephones down at central office. And for me, it was like an honor to go there. And we we couldn't get anybody to join us. Our group people just didn't want to do that. And there were a few of us that just said, well, we'll just do it. We'll just keep doing it. And we did that. I've taken meetings to recovery centers and, participated in other outside groups and participated in panels. And what I was told in AA is if you're asked and requested to do something, you just, I have to say yes. David, my first sponsor, said you have to just say yes. If somebody asks you to do something, they ask you to speak at a meeting, you say yes. If they ask you to read something, you say yes. If they ask you to go to coffee, you say yes. If they ask you to lunch, you say yes. And that was, in the beginning, that was really hard for me because it was like, I was a terrified gay man, not wanting to participate in anything. And today I'm grateful for the fact that they made me do that, because I can walk into any meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and feel comfortable. I can walk into a straight meeting and say I'm a gay man, and it's like it's like, I love that Alcoholics Anonymous has to accept me. I love the third tradition that it says, I fall into both fags and fallen women, and and I love Alcoholics Anonymous because of that. That there's, there are things that were set up that other people thought were going to be really important, and that we have to be accepting of everybody and everybody equally. And I'm grateful for the fact that everybody is an equal here, and everybody needs to be treated as an equal here. And that, I've heard some of the wisest things from the guy who's living out on the street coming into an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. Ted, I don't know if there's a lot of people that knew Ted, Ukulele Ted, and he used to come to PTP every morning, and he would give these, he was a paranoid schizophrenic and just as crazy as a loon, but he would sometimes say something that would be like, oh shit, I needed to hear that. That's what this is all about. This is not about being, you can be as crazy as you want to be, but the fact is, have I done something good for somebody else today? So what is my responsibility to Alcoholics Anonymous? It's like, for me, it's like, I need to do some basic things on a regular basis. I need to know where my next meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous is. And for right now, at 34 years of sobriety, I have 3 meetings I attend regularly. Sometimes I get to a 4th and a 5th meeting in a week, but I always attend those 3 meetings. Still, I have to be there. I need to talk to other people in recovery, and I do that. I have a group of people that I'm in contact with every morning. I send them a text every morning saying, even if it's just good morning, how are you? Reminder, it's one day at a time. It's just little things, just little messages, and it takes me no time to do that, but it's connecting with another alcoholic and saying, just letting them know that I'm okay and they're okay. And then the one that's really important to me is still talking to an alcoholic who's still in the problem. And that person that's still in the problem is my mother. And she's 90 years old, still drinking. She has her box of wine in her refrigerator. Thank God she does. I've taken her meetings of AA. She thinks it's very nice for me, but it's not for her. But for me, talking to her, it's my reminder of what it could be like. I don't want to be 90 years old, still wondering if my box of wine is going to be full enough. So I get to come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and Alcoholics Anonymous works. There's a lot of people I know that right now there's this big push. There's trying to find the magic pill for AA. the magic mushroom pill is the one that they're working on right now. And for me, it's like, I was told to, if they had a pill you could take have you recover from alcoholism, would you take it? And my problem is I'm an alcoholic addict who would want to take 2 or 3 of them. So no, I wouldn't take it. I get to come here and I get to work a program that, some people, they're very spiritually based. Mine is like, it's spiritually based, but I'm not hearing the clouds open and angels singing. But I know that the world is a better place if I don't drink. Everybody's much more tolerant when I don't drink. I'm much more tolerant of everybody if I don't drink. And we talk about the fact that, the longer you're sober, the narrower the road gets. And now I go to meetings and I'm sitting in rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and there's not a lot of people ahead of me that have more time than I do. But I'm grateful for the fact that there's usually one person in the room that has more time than me. And I'm grateful when they open up their mouths and talk about it. And, I have a couple of people that, I attend meetings with that have the exact same sobriety time that I do. And I'm grateful for them because they're, we're all going through the same things at the same time. And I'm just grateful that AA still works. And for me, it still works, but I still have to do the work. I still have to attend meetings. I still have to open the 900-pound big book and, read something.
What I want to say, Kevin, is that I've just been so touched listening to your story, and I'm so glad you shared as much as you did about your experience with a gay man in AA in your early years.
There was a period of time that, gay AA meetings were really important for me at the time that, we had to be in the closet. It was like we had to find a place that was safe for us. So, it's like, and today I think that, the gay community has gotten so diverse that AA doesn't have to have just a gay AA meeting. How do we separate, why would we separate ourselves from anybody? Somebody should be able to walk into any meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and be safe there. And I like that there's AA meetings that are focused on, that have a gay focus, but it's like we would never turn anybody away for not being gay. The fact is, there was a time that even the Capitol Hill Club was like, well, this is a gay meeting. It should be an exclusively gay meeting. And it's like, no, it shouldn't be. It's a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Focus with gay people. But no, if a straight guy wants to come in and talk about his girlfriend, we have to be able to let him do that. And I think that's where we're getting away from that exclusivity, and that and I know there's AA meetings for doctors, and there's AA meetings for lawyers, and there's AA meetings for this group and that group. But the fact is, I should be able to walk into any of those meetings, not being a part of that group, and be able to feel comfortable about talking about alcoholism. I always had the argument, if I'm going to be drinking, and that's the only meeting that I know of that's happening on a Saturday morning, and I'm going to take a drink, are you going to throw me out? And I had many lesbians tell me, yes, because it's a women's meeting. It's like, screw you. It's an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. But I understand that some people need to feel safe in a certain type of group, but it's Alcoholics Anonymous. And we just need to be, it's about that alcoholic who's still suffering, and who knows what we're going to hear from a person we don't expect. So, it can't be just a one-sided thing.
I feel really grateful that I got to hear your story.